mean the user interface. Hello, is the communication clear? Hello,
Yes, it is.
it is clear. Okay, so in
Yes.
front end, okay, in front end web development, you are building user interfaces, right? What I mean user interfaces, you are talking about what the user sees, right? If you visit a website like any website or any application, let's say you go to www.jumia or konga or gg.com.ng. Now, a page is displayed on your browser, right? Now, all those things you are seeing on the browser, they are the user interfaces. So that's the job of a front-end web developer, to build the visible part of a website or a web application, right? And you do that using technologies like HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. Now, these are some of the things we'll be cover as we go on in this class. Now, the second one is back-end web development. Now, remember, we said that front-end web development involves building what the user can see. Now, in back-end web development, you are building what the user cannot see. You are building the logic of the application, right? The business logic of the application. So it involves using technologies, right? Like JavaScript, a Node, PHP, Python, to write server-side languages, right? That the user can't see. Now, the next one is the full stack web development. Now, full stack is a combination of front-end web development and back-end web development, right? So as a full stack web developer, you're expected to know how to build what the user can see and also what the user cannot see, right? So you integrate the two of them. So that's full stack web development. But for the purpose of this class, we are looking at the first one, which is the front end web development and needed to execute them. Over to the next page, Mr. Larry. All right. Now, the problem with let me say the most common thing that will happen these days is that people want to learn web development and they just jump right into coding immediately. They write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Yeah, that's good. That's the technologies you need to write. But hey, the truth is you need to know what you are writing and you need to know why you are writing what you are writing, right? You don't just start writing things without knowing what they do. So my opinion, before you start writing anything, right? Before you start writing the HTML, the CSS of this word and the JavaScript, you first of all have to go and study, right? So you have to study to know what you are writing. So I suggest you go and look at the internet protocols, right? The internet protocols, how the internet work, like the HTTP protocol, that's the hypertext transfer protocol, the request and response over. So go and study the internet. Go and study how request and response are made, right? But it's very difficult to get people to study though, but actually some people can. But if you're not the type of person that can go hours and study things, right, you can just look off for the HTTP protocol because it will help you to understand a bit of what you're doing. Now, if you look at the diagram in the screen here, is a HTTP request response overview. Besides HTTP is, like I said before, is a hypertext transfer protocol, right? If you look at what is showing on your screen, it is a client, right? You see a client side, which you have the browser, right? The browser can be your Chrome, it can be your Safari, it can be your Firefox and the rest, right? So we call them clients, right? Now, if you see the client is making a HTTP request to a web server, right? Now, the web server, on the other hand, is serving in the response part, right? The browser has already made a request as a HTTP request to the server, looking for pages, right? Like HTML pages, right? So the web browser now has access to those files, right? The web browser has access to HTML. It has access, the web server, sorry, has access to the HTML files, to the CSS file, and to the JavaScript. So the web server will now send the response to the browser. So now the browser will have the page displayed on your screen. So as a front-end web developer, your job is to build this HTML. Your job is to know how to write this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript so that when anybody peradventure goes to, let's say, your URL, these pages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, these files will be sent back to the client's browser so that the person can see the visual parts, right? So your job as a front-end web developer is to build HTML, to write HTML, CSS. Hello, is it clear? Can you hear me?
Yeah, please,
Yes.
can they also permit some people? Some people said they are waiting.
Okay. Mr. Larry?
Absolutely, yeah. It's just taking time. I think it's the network.
Okay. So like I was saying, your job as a front-end web developer is to know how to write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So that's your job, right? Write these things, these three languages that are visible, that the browser can interpret. Because the fact is this, the browser, all browsers know how to interpret HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So as a front-end web developer, your job is to know how to write this thing that the browser can interpret, right? So that whenever somebody goes to a website, the browser will serve these three files to the person. All right, so that is HTTP protocol. And guys, you need to go and look at it before you start anything in web development, because they are very necessary. It is a guide to help you to know why you will write HTML, why you will write CSS, and why you should write JavaScript. So over to the next screen. All right, like I said, front end web development is before is building user interfaces with front end technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So whatever you're doing in front end web development will revolve around these three core concepts: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Now, the problem with web development these days is that way back, maybe in the last decade, right, 10 years back, it's easier to learn web development, easier in the sense that there are no distractions, right? You just learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That's what you learn, right? No distractions, right? So you know what you learn and you just go for it. But nowadays, there's a whole lot involved, right? There's a whole lot involved, a whole lot of materials, a whole lot of frameworks, a whole lot of, right, libraries that are available, right? So before now, you might have heard of Bootstrap, might have heard of Material, CSS, heard of React, Angular, Vue. There's a whole lot. And one of the challenge you'll be facing as somebody who is going into web development is to know which one to actually go for, right? Because it requires a whole lot of discipline to stick to what you're doing, because there's a whole lot out there that can make you think that the technologies you are using is obsolete, right? So that's why we are here today, to give you a guide on what to do, on which text to stick to, right? So that you'll be able to avoid this distraction. I need to learn this, I need to learn that, I need to learn this. So stick to what we are giving you today, because no matter what, everything about front-end web development is revolving around these three things: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They are the basis, they are the core. Every other thing is built on top of these three texts. All right. So front-end web development technologies, like I say, The first one is HTML5, right? Now, HTML5 is the current version. So in HTML5, you are writing, before I go further, HTML is an acronym for Hypertext Markup Language. It is not a programming language, right? Just get that. HTML is not a programming language. It is a markup language, right? It is a language that tells the browser how to display the contents, right? Now in HTML5, you have tags, right? They use tags to tell, HTML5 use tags to tell the browser how to display its content. So in HTML, you'll be seeing something like um, P tags, meaning the paragraphs, the H tags, H1 tags, meaning the headings. So these are the kind of things you'll be seeing in HTML5. It is the building block. It is the first thing you need to learn, right? If you are going into web development, you must start with HTML. It is a must. That's where everything starts from, all right? So it is the job of HTML, right, is, is that it tells the browser how to display things. It is the structure, right? It's the skeleton of a web application, right? It tells the browser, oh, this is a P tag. Oh, this is a H1 tag. Now, if you go to web browser like website, you will see text that are very bold, right? Like the titles, they are very bold. Now, beneath it, you might see some other titles, the other texts that are very small. Now you see the first title, the first one is bold and the second one is small, right? So it is the job of the HTML to tell the browser, you need to display this as a bold text and you need to display this as a small text. So HTML is markup, right? It tells the browser how to display content. That's the basic job of HTML. Now, in HTML, there are things you need to must know. There are things you must know. After going through the basics, go and learn HTML5 semantics, right? Because nowadays things are shifting, right? Is way back before, you will use something like divs and spans and basic HTML5, but things are changing from that to semantics, because semantics gives more meaning to the browser and even to the web developer, right? Instead of empty digs, you've seen something like articles, sections, and asides and other ones. So I suggest you must know how to write HTML semantics, right? After learning the basics, learn the HTML semantics because you'll be using that a lot. It is the current trend of writing HTML. Learn the semantics. All right. So after okay, after learning HTML5, you go to CSS3. That's the next thing on the screen. Now CSS is the style. Like we said, HTML5 is the structure, right? Now CSS5 is the style. It makes your web page looks beautiful, right? Like it adds color. If you go to website, you will see they are very colorful, right? They are very appealing. So that's the job of the CSS, right? It gives colors and it makes website to look good. Is it more interested in the aesthetics, right? Yeah, that's the basic job of CSS. It makes website looks more beautiful. Now, before you leave CSS, before you can say that I'm okay with CSS, there are things you need to know. The first one there is selectors. You need to know selectors and specificity, how to select HTML element and style them. You need to know media queries / responsiveness. Nowadays, you will see yeah, you will see like the website, you can view it on your desktop computer. You can also view it on your tab and it's looking fine. You can also view it on your mobile device like your phone and it's also looking fine. So it is the job of media queries, right? So you need to learn media queries. Now the next one is Flexbox. Flexbox is just how to align things, right? Align things in your website. So you need to know discrete items, right? Before you say that, oh, I'm okay with CSS. Now these are the ones that I listed. There are other things you need to know too. You need to know the CSS basics. But before you jump over to the next thing, you need to get this straight away. You to know them very well. Now, after learning HTML5 and CSS3, I suggest you build something, right? Just take something and build, right? Now, the project there is build a static responsive website and a calculator. Now, what we mean static responsive website, we don't mean building something that big, right? Just build something that is just static, no interactivity, right? Just write HTML, write CSS, just make it look good, just to test what you have learned so far, right? And you can also build a calculator. Now, when I mean calculator, I don't mean including the functionalities of a calculator, like the add, just build a static calculator that doesn't do any operation. It doesn't perform any operation, right? Just we need to see how it looks, the outlook, the user interface, not the functionalities. So you can try your hands in these two projects and any other one you can think of. Now, learning HTML5 and CSS3, please, it will take you like a month. So don't rush it. Just take your time to to get used to it, right? Now the next one is SaaS. Now this is an additional package. You can choose to learn or not to learn it. Well, I advise you to learn it because it helps you write CSS better, right? So if you have time, learn it, right? Yeah, that's what I can say about it. The next one is frameworks. Now, after learning HTML5, CSS3, you need to learn frameworks, right? Now, the popular ones are Bootstrap, Tailwind CSS, and Material CSS. Now, you don't need to learn all of them, right? Just pick one and learn, right? You mustn't learn everything because at the core, they do almost the same thing, right? Now, the work of frameworks like this is to help you minimize your CSS code, right? It helps you minimize your CSS code because they have inbuilt classes that does something. So instead of writing plenty CSS, you'll be writing just a few CSS if you are using frameworks. So my opinion though, I suggest you learn Bootstrap for starts, and maybe later on you can't go with the rest. Now, down the line, you have JavaScript, right? Now, like I said before, HTML5 is not a programming language. We say it's a markup language. Now, CSS3 is not also a programming language. It's a style sheet. As the name implies, CSS means cascaded style sheet. So it is a style sheet, right? Now, JavaScript. JavaScript is the next thing you need to learn as a front-end web developer. After learning HTML, CSS, you need to learn JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is the brain, right? It is the programming language. Yeah. HTML, not a programming language. CSS is not, but JavaScript is a programming language. It is used to it is used to add interactivity to your web application, right? It adds interactivity to your web application. For instance, you go to a web application, you can be able to click a button and something will happen. That's the job of the JavaScript. It helps you to create a dynamic page, right? To create things that are dynamic instead of having a static website with HTML and CSS. Now, if you add JavaScript, your application becomes more dynamic, right? You can do a lot of things. You can submit a form by clicking a button. That's the job of the JavaScript, right? So it's good to learn JavaScript. In fact, you must learn JavaScript. That's the next thing you learn after HTML, CSS. So go to JavaScript and learn JavaScript. Now, before you leave JavaScript, there are basic things you need to know, right? Aside from learning the basics of JavaScript, which are the data types, structures, functions, loops, and the rest, you need to learn how to manipulate the DOM, right? You need to learn how to work with the DOM. DOM is the document object model. It's just like an interface where you can access the HTML and manipulate them using your JavaScript code. So learn DOM, learn asynchronous JavaScript. That's the promise and async await, right? Learn fetch API, how to make requests to an API, because as a front-end web developer, you'll be making API calls. You'll be sending requests to endpoints, right? To fetch data that you'll be consumed in your application. So you need to learn it. You need to learn your array methods. Now, we have a lot of array method in JavaScript, but I think map, reduce, filter, and for each are a must know before you leave JavaScript to the next tag. So 3 things now we've discussed about the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript as the core, right? In web development, you must know it, and you must know it very well. Don't rush it, just take your time, know it, because if you don't know it very well, you will have problem even after becoming the front-end web developer. Because if you don't know how to code JavaScript, is a big issue. So take your time and play with it, build projects. All right. So the next slide is can you do slide 7, right? Okay. So after learning JavaScript, you need to ask yourself question whether you actually can do JavaScript, right? Because after learning JavaScript, you are meant to build projects that are in your previous screen, right? You're meant to build those projects. Now, if you can build those projects comfortably, you can move on to the next slide. But if you can't build those projects, you need to go back and still learn JavaScript, because it is the very core of web development. You need to learn JavaScript. All right. So if you can do JavaScript very well and do all the things that we are highlighted that you should do, that you are supposed to know, then you can move over to the next slide. All right, the next slide is frameworks. Right. They are JavaScript frameworks, not just any kind of frameworks. They are JavaScript frameworks, right? Now, writing core Java, vanilla JavaScript or basic JavaScript can be time consuming. That's why we have frameworks. Frameworks help to simplify things, right? You don't need to write a whole lot of code, because in a framework, there are some things that have been written to you. You just have to use them. It's not like you are writing everything from the scratch. A lot of things have been done for you, so you just use them. Now, JavaScript has popular frameworks, which are React.js, AngularJS, and Vue.js, right? So you don't need to learn the 3 of them for start. You just need to pick one. So I suggest React.js because it is the most popular framework, right? Now, after learning JavaScript, come to frameworks and pick React.js. Now you can learn the other ones later, but start with React.js. Now, in React.js, there are things you're expected to know before you say, okay, I'm okay with React.js. You must learn functional components and hooks, right? You must know React Router. You must know how to make API calls. You must know array methods, and you must know state management. Under state management, you can learn context API, which is inbuilt in React, right? And Redux, which is a different package. So these are the things you need to learn in React.js. There are other things, but these are the ones you must pay attention to because you will use them most of the times. All right. Now, so after learning React.js, learn Git and GitHub, right? Yeah. Git is a version control system for keeping track of your code changes, while GitHub is an online platform that helps you to manage your Git repositories, right? Now learn it because it's very important in order to organize your code, right? If you build projects, you just push it to your GitHub account, right? Where you can, at that point, you can collaborate with other developers. So it's very important you learn Git and GitHub after learning React.js. Now, the next thing in the pipeline is deployment platforms. Okay, after building your project or any application you choose to work on, right? Because at this point, after learning React.js, you're expected to know how to build simple applications, right? You can build a to-do app, a note-taking app, right? All those simple apps, you're expected to know how to build them after learning React.js. So after learning them, build these projects, and after building projects, it doesn't remain on your local machine or your computer. You have to put them online so that people can actually visit it and see what you've done, the work you've done. So we have a few deployment platforms here. We have Netlify, we have Vercel, we have DigitalOcean. So you can choose any of them, but I don't know. I just like Netlify because I've worked with it. That doesn't mean that Vercel and DigitalOcean is not good. I've worked with DigitalOcean, but I've not worked with Vercel, and I'm hoping to work with it because I know it's also cool. So choose any one of them to work with, because Netlify, I've worked with Netlify. It's at least it is easier for you to deploy in. It is easy for you to deploy in Netlify because they will do everything for you. Um, they you can buy a domain name from Netlify, and you can also host your files, host your application in Netlify. They do all that for you, and they also have free accounts where you can um host your application, right, without fee. All you need to pay for is your domain name. They can host it in a free account, so you can build apps and deploy them easily on Netlify. Now, below it, you have Namecheap, Bluehost, GoDaddy. These are places where you can buy your domain name. Now, what I mean by domain name is you have names like www.google.com, livescore.com. All those things are domains. You can buy domain name from there. You can view it. So over to the next slide. Hello, Mr. Larry. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me, Mr. Larry?
Yes, I can.
Okay. In this slide, what we have here, a front-end developer should be able to do the following basic things. Now, as a front-end web developer, you're expected to know how to do these basic things, right? So when you must have learned HTML5, CSS3, the CSS processors like SAS and LESS, the CSS frameworks like Bootstrap, Tailwind, and Material CSS, the JavaScript, the JavaScript frameworks like React, Angular, or Vue, the Git and GitHub, right? And you know the deployment platforms. When you must have learned all of this, now you are ready. Well, I say ready. Yeah, you are a front-end web developer. Yeah. When you know all these things and you're sure you know all these things, you're already a front-end web developer, and you're expected to do the following basic things, right? You're expected to create a website layout with HTML, CSS, which you've learned. You're expected to know JavaScript and how to work with DOM. Now, you remember DOM is one of the things I say you should know how to do under JavaScript, right? Now, you're expected also to create basic interactive front-end application. Now, remember, in order to make your front-end application interactive, you need JavaScript. So you must be able to create basic interactive front-end application with JavaScript. Now, the next one, you must be able to connect to APIs and make requests via fetch, right? All right, so fetch API, when we discussed about JavaScript, I told you that I told you guys that it is very important you know how to make API calls, fetch, right? Also in React JS, you're expected to know how to make these calls using libraries like Axios do. But you still get to that when you start learning React. So you're expected to know how to do this. Now, the fifth one, you're expected to know how to work with JIT, which is the version control system to keep track of your code changes. You're expected to know how to deploy and manage production projects. Yeah, you don't just work on projects and keep them on your local machine. That's your computer. You need to put it out live so that when you have employers, you can give them link to your projects. They will see from wherever they are. All right, so these are the basic things you're expected to know as a front-end web dev. All right, over to the next slide. Okay, basic and extra programming tools. So before you go into start whatever start front-end web development, yeah, there are basic tools you need to have, right? It's not that much. Okay, not that much. Yeah, you need to have a computer that has operating system installed. It's not that huge. I mean, your system requirements doesn't have to be that big for you to be able to do these tasks. You need a web browser. Yeah, you need a web browser. Web browsers are by default. Um, you see them on systems, or you can install one if you don't have one. So you need a computer with an operating system, you need a web browser, you need a text editor or IDE. IDE is integrated development environment. Is an environment where you actually write your code, right? Remember, I said as a front-end web developer, you need to know how to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and the rest. Now, where do you write it? You write those code in your IDE. So that's the environment where you code. Now the terminal, you need to learn how to work with the terminal to navigate between folders on file, because most times as a developer, you need to be able to do basic tasks in your terminal, right? You need to be able to create folders, open your integrated development environment, do a whole lot of stuff in the terminal. So you need to learn how to work with the terminal. Now, design software. The design software, it is not compulsory or it's not mandatory, but you can go you can just look at it, you can just learn it, right? Especially if you're a freelancer, right? Because freelancers, they work on their own, as opposed to people that are hired by a company. Because if you are working for a company, chances are that you have a UI UX guy that does the design for you, right? So you just focus on writing your code. But if you're a freelancer writing, doing all those things by yourself, you should know how to work with these few tools. So over to the extra programming tool. I've talked about terminals in Windows. Terminals, like the PowerShell is also a terminal in Windows. Yeah. So looking at the next block, we have extra programming tools, right? Now, the what I've explained before are the basic, but these ones are the extra. You need to know JIT, right? Yeah, you need to know JIT. You need to know NPM. Now, NPM is a node package manager, though. You will still know all these things when you kick off, when you get to a starting point, a certain point, all these things begin to make sense to you. You need to know npm to manage your projects. Yeah, you need to know web dev tools, right? Now every browser has web dev tools, right? Where you can be able to play ar- play around, right? You can troubleshoot your code using um your dev tools, right? You can select elements, you can write JavaScript, you can do a whole lot. You can will I say debug? You can debug your errors, your code errors via your dev tools. So it's very important you know how to work with it, because as a developer, you can't do without these dev tools, because they'll help you to check for some certain things in your code, manage errors and debug errors and select elements and the rest. Now, the next one is Emmet, Live Server, and Prettier. Now, those ones are extensions they are extensions. They help you to, like the Emmet helps you to write HTML easily. The Live Server helps you to spin up um, a, a server that will run your application. The Prettier helps you to just kind of format your code. Now, these are available. You can get this thing in some editors, right? Some text editors, right? You will see these things as extension in text editors. Now, as per text editor or IDE, my opinion though, I advise you to go with a Visual Studio Code as the text editor. If you go to the basic programming tools, the number 3 point there is text editor, right? I advise you to go to Visual Studio Code because it's come along with all these Emmet, Lifeserver, and Pretty as extension. So if you download Visual Studio Code, you can be able to install all this and many more as the extra programming tools that helps programming easy. So over to the next slide. Okay, here are the resources that you can lay your hands to if you want to learn HTML, right? This is not exhaustive, but we just um to show you where to start with. You have frontendmasters.com, w3schools.com. These are sources where you can learn HTML from. For CSS, you have frontendmasters.com and still W3 School from. So these are sources where you can learn and learn it very well, right? They are trusted. So they will guide you very well in learning HTML and CSS. Now JavaScript, you can learn it from frontendmasters.com. So these are all resources where you can learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Even YouTube, you can get materials from YouTube, right? Yeah, you can get quality materials from YouTube too. So yeah, you have where you can get them and they are free. Over to the next one. Okay, yeah, closing remarks. Okay, we started with front end web development, right? But up to this point. So for me, I judging from what I've seen down the years, I know that there are pressure when you start doing this, right? There's a whole lot involved in trying to be a web developer because, like I said before, the truth is there are a lot of things out there that can easily get you distracted. Yeah. So the thing is, I would suggest, right, you go for a boot camp, right? If you have the resources, if you have the money, you can go for a boot camp Now, why I suggest boot camp is this. If you go to a boot camp, they will narrow you down to specific things you need to learn, right? It will help to limit distractions. And you have mentors that are with you 24/7 to guide you. Because one of the challenges you will have starting out is that um, you will run into bugs or errors that will take you weeks or months to solve. And chances are you might be discouraged from going further. So you need people that are senior developers around you that can guide you and help you fix these bugs so that you won't be discouraged. All right. And um the next thing why I suggest you should go for a boot camp is that at least you'll be dedicated, right? Boot camp is where you go and spend like 8 or 12 hours a day writing code. Unlike you staying on your own, it requires a lot of discipline to do that. But if you're at a boot camp, it's just an environment where the only thing you do is just to code. So I suggest you go for a boot camp just because of these two reasons, right? It will narrow you down and avoid distractions, and you will spend most of your time coding, because web development is not what you do 2 hours in a day or 3 or 4 hours in a day. You need to do like 8 or 9 hours coding in a day, right? 7, 8, 9 hours coding in a day. So that's why I subscribe to you going to that. Okay. So number one, there is no competition. In web development, don't put the pressure on yourself, right? Because the truth is you won't be a good web developer in 3 months or 4 months or 5 months, right? It takes time, right? From 8 to 12 months. From 8 to 12 months, you can be a web developer. But if you're expected to be a good web developer in 3 or 4 or 5 months, I'm not doubting your self-desire, but I mean it's very difficult, right? It's very difficult to be a good web developer in 3 or 4 months. So it takes time. So give yourself the time. There's no competition, right? You can learn at your own pace, but be consistent. Do it every single day. Put your time. Now, the second one is investing your time and your resources. Like I said, you have to invest your time. If you don't want to go to a boot camp, you have to buy courses, right? There are courses online. Now, why I subscribe you buy courses online is because um number one, they will kind of the same thing I said before, they will kind of narrow your angle down, right? You don't have to look elsewhere because you already have the materials to study. All right. So buy courses of online if you have the money. There are paid courses you can buy. You can buy them, right? They are good. But if you don't want to buy them, you can also get for this level, right? You have a whole lot of materials that are free that you can access, and they are quality materials that you can read and still become a front-end developer. So if you have the money, buy. If you don't have the money, it's okay. You can get free materials that are quality that can guide you into becoming what you want to. Now, the third one is learn current trends and techs at your own pace. Now, you need to learn current trends, right? Now, when you see materials online, you need to check whether they are current or they are old materials, because up until today, I still see materials online that does react the old way. So you need to know the current trends in any technology that you're using. Don't just go and start reading materials that the text that they were using back then, like decades ago. So make sure you learn current things, right? And learn at your own pace. Now, the next one is learn by building. Yeah, that's very important. You learn by building. You don't just watch video online and say, okay, yeah, I know how to do it. You can beat your chest that you've known how to do it when you actually use it to build something. So learn by building, because it helps to build your confidence, and start with small projects. Don't go and carry big projects and start building, because chances are that you might not finish that project and it will discourage you, right? So start small, right? and move from there. Learn how to appreciate the little things you build, because that will boost your confidence. Now, the next one, do not cram codes. Yeah, that's very important. Do not cram codes, right? Because most of the times, what you already need is online. There's a lot of materials out there that you can get your hands to. So you don't need to cram codes. You just need to know what to do, know how to do it, where to get it is there, right? So don't cram codes. Is what you're cramming is already online, free, that you can go and get and put in your program. Now, the next one is finish one project before you jump into another one. Don't do two projects simultaneously. You need to finish one, right? Know you are done with this project before you jump into another one. That's how it works. Doing two projects at time, it's not a good thing, right? You need to put all your energy, your attention, your time to one project, finish it, then go to another one. Now, the last one is deploy your projects. You need to be able to deploy your projects. Yeah. After building projects, make sure you deploy them. Like I've said before, don't keep it on your local machine. So guys, this is yeah, this is my own take on parts to becoming a front-end web developer. So thank you. Mr. Larry. Mr. Larry, can you hear me?
Oh yes, I can. I can. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my friend. I mean that was a very insightful and informative session, right? If you guys will agree with me, first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much, Uche. Thank you so much, right? Getting you to be on this training session with us. I mean, it's a privilege, and I'm very grateful for that. I mean, and for you guys, right? I mean, I strongly believe that what you have here, I mean, what Uche shared with all of us, I mean, it's the guiding, right? The guide, right, into becoming a software developer, a front end software, right, software developer. I mean, I recall when I started my journey, right? I mean, I wish I wish I had, you know, a guide like this. I wish I had a guiding materials like this, right? Something to put me through the step-by-step approach, right, on what to learn and how to go about it, right, to develop my skill sets, right? And I mean, like you rightly said, a boot camp, right? One of the major advantages of a boot camp is that it gives you structure, right? It gives you structure, and structure helps you develop your competency at every stage or layer, right? Which is very important, right? And notwithstanding, right, you can be a self-taught developer, okay? That is, you can go online, follow this guide that has been provided to you today,
Yeah,
HTML,
I agree.
CSS, right, and JavaScript. Of course, in between you have the SaaS, you have the frameworks, right? So, I mean, you can go in that direction as well and deepen your knowledge, and you still come out fine. Okay, so I mean, to each his own, really. Okay, so at this point, I mean, would like to ask you guys, I mean, if there's any question you have, you want to ask. Some people dropped some comments in the uh, chat box, but I believe I responded to that. All right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, someone asked, where does Visual Studio uh, VS Code, right? Visual Studio Code fit into all this? And
Oh, okay.
yeah, you already touched on that, which is the text editor
Text
slash.
editor. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Then, of course, someone asked again, well, HTML is the acronym for what? I responded to that as well, right, in the chat box. So, I mean, if there's any other question, I mean, this will be the time to, to ask those questions. You can unmute yourself, unmute your mic and ask the question or drop a a message in the chat box, whichever is more comfortable for you. Right. So I mean, anyways, while we wait for you guys to ask questions, if any, right? I mean, I would just like to buttress on the essence of this training. Okay, it's a guide, right? If you're looking at the technology space, right? If you're looking at the technology space as a career path, right? Software development, front end, back end, or full stack, right? It's a credible and credible path, right? You can choose to follow. More importantly, because um, the demand for this skill set in the marketplace, it's enormous, right? The demand is enormous, and I mean, part of the interesting thing that has happened over time is the fact that as a software developer, irrespective of where you are, right, you can work literally from anywhere. Okay, I mean, I have quite a number of friends, right, and core software developers who, I mean, they work in Nigeria, but or from Nigeria, but they work with international firms, right? It could be in Germany, it could be in the US, it could be in the UK, I mean, it could be in Finland, right? The point is, it gives you that avenue or that platform, right, to engage your skill sets remotely. And of course, the benefit to that is you also get to earn, in foreign currency of whichever company and the country you are working for. I mean, and beyond that, I mean the skill set. I mean, even in Nigeria, it's quite interesting, right? And companies pay top-notch value, right, for software developers. So I guess I'm saying all of this to reiterate the fact that yes, it's hard work, right? You have to put in the work, right? It's hard work, and like you rightly said, I mean, it said at least you're looking at 8 hours per day coding. I mean, personally, I'm a self-taught developer. When I say self-taught, I mean I didn't go to a bootcamp, right? And what I did back then was I created an Excel sheet, and that Excel sheet is supposed to journal my hours of learning every day. So my target was 8 hours per day. So every single day I shoot for that. I shoot for 8 hours per day. There were days I did 5 hours. There were days I did 12 hours, right? So, however, there was that consistency every day, plugging myself into,
Yeah, I agree with you.
into that environment, into that industry, right? And by consistently applying myself to it, I mean, on my Excel sheet, I mean, I was just showing to a friend recently. I mean, I wrote it there that within, no, not within, I mean, on or before March 31st, 2022, I'm going to start a job as a front-end developer. I was looking to transition into tech, right? And indeed, it did happen, right? It did happen for me. And I strongly believe that if you are willing to commit yourself, right, to that path, that is, if this is something you want to do, front end, it could be back end, right? But however, if you're willing to commit yourself, commit your time to it, you will get the result you're looking for, right? You will get it, right? So, Uche, I don't know if there's any other tip you want to share before we wrap up this session.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, because the thing is, front end web development, it requires hard work, right? You don't need to be extra smart, right? Because front end doesn't involve logic, right? So it's just hard work. You need to put in the work, right? Is it taxing? Yes. Or is it possible? Yes. So it's just hard work. You need to invest your time, right? Because the thing is, companies hire web developers and they pay them very well, right? They pay them very well because of the services they are rendering. So it is a path that if you want to go into it, you don't need to be that much smart, just need to be disciplined and dedicated. Yeah, that's one of the things that are needed. You need to be disciplined, you need to be dedicated, right? And you go for it. So just take your time and just do it if you choose to do it. So yeah, that's the basic thing. So that's it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for plugging in today. Right. I mean, these sessions were planned, right, and designed for you guys. And I would like to say a big thank you, to our team as well, right? Our volunteers. I mean, Nostra Initiative is a non-profit, so which means that we work with volunteers, we work with instructors who volunteer to come and disseminate information, right, to you guys, right, for your career growth, right? So I mean, I just want to say a big thank you to the team, right? None of this could have happened without them. And of course, thank you too, for plugging in, right? And I hope you learned one or two things, right, you can take away, right, from this session. More so, this session will be uploaded on YouTube, right? And the links will be shared, right? If you need to go back and revisit any of the lessons, right, that was shared today. So thank you, everyone. If you don't mind, you can unmute your mic and just say thank you to our instructor.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, you're welcome. Favor Olayede.
Thank you very much.
So I joined late, but I will make sure I communicate with you later.
Like the Mr. Larry said, the video will be uploaded in on YouTube, right, Mr. Larry?
Oh yes, yes, it will.
The video will uploaded in YouTube, so you can go to YouTube and check it out.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you, and bye for now.
All right.